A good morning. Let's talk about how to tune that vibe out of your yo-yo. Now, for the most part, these help with the way that the yo-yo is sitting in the bearing, because the post makes the biggest difference in vibe. That's why a lot of bearing posts, you need a tool to remove the bearing, because if you have a loose post, more likely than not, you're going to have some vibe. Might be a minor amount, but it's hard with a loose post to get dead smooth. Okay, so a couple of tips and tricks. The first one, and then this will coincide with the second type of the tip as well. First things first, take your axle, put it all the way inside one half, screw it together, test it. Take it apart, take that axle out, put it all the way into the other half, put it together, test it. Third one, put the axle all the way into a half and back it off just a little bit. So like put it all the way in and then give it one full turn out from being all the way in, put it back together and test it. That could just be a difference in depending on how big the tap is compared to your axle. Sometimes there's a little extra leeway for the axle, sometimes there's not. So you've done the axle swapping to try and get it smooth. Now, the more important part for me, or the part that usually works out better for getting vibe out of a yo-yo, tighten that yo-yo until its first sign of being completely tight. So fingertip tight. Boom. Test it. Now, crank it a little more. Test it. Crank it a little more. Test it. Crank it a little more. Test it. And at that point, you're probably to where you don't want to crank it anymore because you're afraid of stripping it. But usually the tightness can affect the vibe. It's affecting how the yo-yo is kind of sitting in there on the bearing. And you can usually, if it was close to being smooth, you can find a sweet spot that it's smooth. For me, the reminder here for me to make this video was we have the Banshee 22. It's kind of a wider yo-yo, so it can be finicky. But if I put it together and right away it's not smooth and it's going to have to be tuned, it becomes a glitch for us. But then I shipped out some glitches and they were like, hey, this is smooth, perfect. You know, it was supposed to be a glitch. And I just said, it's probably tuned right now. After I marked it, I tuned them. But I didn't want to send them out as A grades because they didn't match up perfectly when I just assembled them normal. I had to mess with the tightening a little bit. And on the tightening, most of the time I find that the last tightness factor, where you're afraid to tighten it anymore, you don't want to strip it, that's usually where it's the most smooth. But there's definitely outliers that it's when it's the loosest or just tight and middle level tightness. It just depends on the yo-yo. But those are my tips for how to take a little bit of a vibey yo-yo and make it smooth. That'll also help with yo-yos that have a little bit of pulse. The difference in tightness kind of adjusts that pulse vibe on it. So you're never going to get a yo-yo that pulses to be dead smooth, but you can also tune out some vibe. Hopefully that helped you. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.